During a sun-drenched, lazy afternoon of my 7th summer, Xiao Mei and I crafted a game involving paper figures. Adults insisted on nap time, yet there we sprawled on the cool mat, sketching numerous little figures on white paper. Bald-headed or long-haired, dressed in suits or in dresses, puffing on cigarettes or cradling teacups, all crudely drawn but endearingly ugly. They were as docile as a flock of sheep, silently and meekly existing on the expanse of white. Only our scissors made a sound, snipping away as we cut them out. We inscribed our names on their backs, names we knew, names we invented on a whim like Meng Meng, Xiao Jing, Xiao Bei. We then animated them within an imagined universe of our creation: parks, zoos, amusement parks, bakeries, schools, hospitals, and homes, bringing them to life with our voices and fingers. They met, they played, they shared blissful ice cream until nightfall, and then bade each other goodbye to return to their homes. We were engrossed in this game, creating countless characters that filled the mat with joyous clutter and the air with flurries of paper scraps. Even the paper bits brought joy. When scattered from the balcony, they danced in the sunlight like snowflakes. Xiao Mei fetched a shoebox to store our treasures, decreeing it could only be opened when both of us were present. I meant to keep that promise, but curiosity was a relentless siren. The box haunted me like the storied vessel trapping evil spirits in Arabian tales, luring me to peek inside at our paper creations. They couldn't cry or laugh, yet they could speak and dance. I bartered a lollipop for Xiao Mei's consent to guard them, sneakily opening the box again and again, discontent when I saw that my own figure lay at the bottom, impulsively moving it atop the rest. If not for my carelessness, our paper game might have persisted. My vanity and affection compelled me to bring the box to school. During the first period of a first-grade math class, Xiao Mei, seated behind me, noticed my betrayal. She kicked my chair ceaselessly, while I, seizing Teacher Wang's momentary turn, made faces at her, arrogantly wielding the figure of Xiao Mei. My display caught Teacher Wang's attention. Swiftly approaching, she snatched the figure from my hands and tapped my head with her pointer, chastising my engagement in such trifling play. Then she collected the whole box of paper figures, taking them to the podium as my heart raced with anxiety. Among them was an ugly and fierce figure bearing Teacher Wang's name on its back. Teacher Wang admonished us for playing with such rubbish instead of paying attention to the lesson. To me, however, they were treasures. I sat there aggrieved until she spotted her own name, inciting her rage further. Clutching the figures, she crumpled them. I cried out in anguish, which only infuriated her more. Empowered, she tore all the figures to shreds, their pieces fluttering down like the paper scraps we had tossed away, still somehow beautiful like those simulated snowflakes. Yet, we wept for now, every figure was ruined except for one, the one that depicted me, preserved on top, stuck to the lid of the shoebox. I later secured it carefully inside a dictionary, never to see the light again. Teacher Wang rebuked my tears, threatening to inform my parents. Xiao Mei ignored me for days until 2 lollipops mended our friendship, but our paper game ceased forever. For that 1 month of summer, I indulged in the most enjoyable game, each paper figure taking on a life of its own in my hands. Now, those figures seem like snowflakes scattered through my life. Even the one inscribed with my name is lost, hiding in corners of darkness I dare not venture, secretly watching as I ebb and flow through the tides of life. Currently, I'm living an undistinguished college life, much like my classmates who find everything intriguing except for their studies. Skipping classes, surfing the internet, clubbing, and dating make up my daily routine. The only semblance of a difference between me and others is the job I've taken up, not out of any need for financial discipline, but from a desire to occupy my time. I work at a nightclub, with my shifts running from 6 in the evening until 1 past midnight. That Saturday felt exceptional, with an unusual surge of youths coming out to revel in the frenzy. At the bar, I was preparing popcorn in a microwave, surrounded by hedonists lost in the moment, gyrating and bellowing like clockwork on the modest dance floor. Sooner or later, the relentless heavy metal music would fray my nerves to shreds. Off in a corner of the dance floor, the house rock band, bald or wildly maned, undistinguishable in gender under the chaotic lighting, added to the apocalyptic frenzy with their raucous chords and the trembling bass of electronic beats. After closing, Kobayashi, a colleague, and I stayed back to clean. Both too exhausted to speak, a silence clouded between us, as thick as the night. Kobayashi, with her delicate features rendered ghostly pale, spoke seldom, her silence reminiscent of the last withering leaves of autumn. Despite my concerns, my offers to escort her home after our shift were steadfastly declined. Thus, we bent to our task, yearning only for the solace of our dorm beds afterwards. Riding an empty overnight bus, the clamor of the city was muffled by night's embrace. I pondered how long I'd linger at the dorm gate, bargaining for entry. Should I be denied, I was resolved to scale the wall. It was 3 a.m. when I left the club. Checking my watch at 3:15, the stark bus interior, with its bright lights, desolate seats, and the chilly air, felt isolating. Then, at an unnamed stop, a boy around 10 boarded, his presence interrupting the eerie calm of the night. Dressed in white sneakers, tan pants, and a blue and white school uniform, a key swung from his neck, each swing casting a spotlight on the "Made in Shanghai" inscription. His bright smile, in the subdued light, sparked an unsettling question: what errand calls a boy out at 3 in the morning? Could he, too, be seeking solace in nightlife after heartbreak? Though the thought seemed absurd, I felt compelled to ask. "Where are you headed?" "Home." He nodded, mentioning he had just left school because of an incident, Li Xiaolan's death. Li Xiaolan. The name sounded familiar yet distant. "Nobody dares to go home," he added, his gaze filled with unspoken fears. He admitted to stepping on her once, flooding back memories of a female classmate's tragic end under similar chaotic circumstances during a blackout in middle school. "Who are you?" My voice carried more weight than panic. "I'm you," he said with a disarming smile, baffling me. As he shared his fear of going home and recounted the gruesome scene, I questioned our identity. "Yes, I'm you." A whimsical thought crossed my mind: if he took an action diverging from my past, might my existence alter? "I've lost myself, please, find me," he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. As the bus sped up, the surrounding fog swiftly receded. He got off abruptly, vanishing into the fog as if he had become one with it. "I've lost myself," I murmured, the sentiment echoing emptily. Turning, the driver's familiar face was revealed, a stark reminder of Li Xiaolan, her visage marred with terror. Seeing something, her oblivious question unnerved me as she announced my impending stop. "We work together, forgotten already?" Her indifference seemed out of place, particularly when an eye, dislodged and unnoticed by her, disappeared between bus seats. "Where will you go?" I asked, shaken. She chuckled lightly. "I drive this bus, ensuring passengers reach their destinations. It's an intriguing job." Baffled by her response, images of paper dolls, one named Li Xiaolan among them, circled in my mind. We had detested her in our childhood games, symbolically defeating her for a fleeting sense of victory. My heart raced with panic as I stepped into the empty streets. As the engine's roar resumed, Li Xiaolan drove off into the deeper night, leaving me wrapped in the cold embrace of solitude. The day I returned to the dormitory, I collapsed into a deep sleep on my bed. The details of entering the room had completely escaped me. My head felt heavier than ever before, and upon waking, the pain was so severe it felt as if it would split open, reminding me of the aftermath of consuming counterfeit liquor. Struggling to rise, I realized my roommates were nowhere to be found. The sunlight outside was cold in hue, with the dusk's light gradually sinking to the west. Glancing at my watch, it was already 4 in the afternoon. At this moment, should any misfortune occur, I feared I might starve. I changed clothes and washed my face in the restroom. Within the dormitory, it was as if a famine had struck. Even when someone occasionally bought some food, it would disappear in the blink of an eye. Attempting to find food in bookshelves and drawers was like searching for diamonds in a desert. I bought 2 pieces of bread on my way to the bus stop. Regardless, I was about to complete the 2-month tenure of my job. I had intended to endure it until I no longer wished to continue, but the appearance of Li Xiaolan plunged me into a whirlwind of reality and memories. Upon boarding the bus, I saw that little boy, the one claiming to be mine, still dressed in his midnight attire, a now slightly dirty white top, with loose shoelaces. He looked quite disheveled. I wasn't sure if he had returned home the day before, and if not, where would he go? He noticed me and came over to ask if I was heading to the place from last night. Somewhat stunned, I replied yes, I had work to finish. In a few days, I would no longer go there. With a simple, "Oh," he sat next to me, head bowed in thought. He then asked if he could ask me a question about something he was struggling to decide on his own. He said that Meng Meng, the daughter of Uncle Li and Aunt Lu living opposite him, was not their biological child but bought from traffickers. He had told his mother, but she didn't believe it and forbade him from telling others. His mother said it would be offensive to people. But it was Meng Meng herself who told him. He didn't know what to do. I slowly retraced my memories, searching for fragments that matched what he said. Then I remembered. At that time, we lived in an economically backward, information-insulated small town in the north. My parents were workers, my grandmother was ill, and life for the whole family was very hard. Uncle Li's family's situation was not much different, and they hadn't been able to have children for many years after getting married. They were almost like relatives to my family, even bringing us dumplings and zongzi during festivals. Later, Aunt Lu disappeared for a long time and returned with a baby in her arms, claiming that she went back to her hometown to give birth. But the adults seemed to have an unspoken understanding that their child was bought, and her name was Li Meng Meng. I was only 3 years old at the time. Meng Meng was always frail and pale, without a trace of healthy rosiness. Aunt Lu held her in her arms like a paper doll, as if a gust of wind could blow her away. I was 5 years old at the time, playing in the yard. Sometimes Aunt Lu would take her to shade under the trees. When I approached, she would open her eyes wide to look at me, always making me feel cold. So I honestly answered the little boy, asking what he planned to do. He said Li Xiaolan would come to take Meng Meng home tonight, and he planned to wait here for her. If Meng Meng didn't know the way, he would guide her. However, I hesitated because Li Meng Meng had long been dead. She died when I was 7. What I said was true. 5-year-old Li Meng Meng was once home alone and fell from the balcony of her house. We all lived on the 6th floor. Later, Aunt Lu was heartbroken. The little boy was obviously dissatisfied with my answer, countering that she was pushed down by Uncle Li. Didn't I know? I was speechless for a moment. Was this little boy really myself? How would he know all this? That day after school, I heard the noise of an argument at Uncle Li's door and curiously spied. Their quarrel became more intense, and finally, Uncle Li threw Meng Meng out from the 6th floor. Standing in the doorway, I screamed involuntarily. Uncle Li rushed out, pulled me into their home, pressed me against the balcony railing, grabbing my collar and threatening that if I dared to speak out, he would throw me down too. I was petrified, but at that time, Uncle Li and Aunt Lu seemed more afraid than me. I told the little boy that even so, she had already died. What was his plan for receiving her? Before we could discuss further, the bus arrived at the station. The little boy ran off the bus like a little rabbit, leaving me alone on the bus, sitting blankly, clueless. If meeting Li Xiaolan was just a nighttime dream, it was now daylight. Once again, I found myself in the chaotic disco, mixing shivas and soda into the so-called signature cocktails, topped with an expired cherry. Despite the steep price, someone still footed the bill. The name of the drink was odd, called Expired Life. Li Xiaolan was still silently standing behind the bar. In the dance floor, numerous revelers screamed and twisted their bodies. One girl caught my attention. She was wearing a handmade white cotton dress, particularly frail as if lightly holding her arm would bruise it. But her eyes were special, hollow with no warmth. When she leaned against the bar to rest, I handed her an expired life. I said, "Hi. Have a drink." She glanced at me coolly and then chuckled lightly, saying thank you, and drank it all in one gulp. She seemed indifferent to the alcohol content, not caring whether she would get drunk. I asked her name. She said she was going back to dance, but then turned back and added, "My name is Li Meng Meng, do you like me?" before disappearing into the chaotic crowd. I wasn't worried about not being able to find her because the little boy said he would come to pick her up. Indeed, in the early morning, I boarded the night bus again. The driver was Li Xiaolan, and the little boy and I were the only passengers on the bus. The emptiness of the bus was unsettling. Li Meng Meng and the little boy sat side by side in front of me. When she saw me, she turned her head and said, "Thank you for the drink, come play with me when you're free." Her face suddenly horrified me, as if falling from a height, her face flat, her nose stuck to her face, a large hole on her head, brain and muscle entwined, smiling at me in a mess of flesh and blood. I was so terrified I could hardly move. I just watched her face as the bus passed by each station. Until the night bus stopped, Li Xiaolan told me it was my stop and asked me to get off. So, I was left at the late-night platform, heading towards the school. The cold gaze of Li Meng Meng seemed to freeze my mind, taking a while before gradually thawing. And that box of paper dolls jumped back into my memory. When one paper doll was discarded, Xiao Mei commented that its arms were too thin, and she didn't like it, but I picked it up saying, "Let's keep it. Does it look like Li Meng Meng who lives across from me? I think I might be suffering from neurasthenia." After a deep, murky sleep, I had a strange dream where numerous paper figures were dancing in front of me before being torn into shreds by a pair of massive hands. Suddenly, I woke up, drenched in cold sweat from head to toe, my body aching as though it was about to be ripped apart, even though I was aware it was just a dream. There were no classes on Saturday. Aimlessly, I roamed the streets, passing by the zoo when I noticed a large photo, an advertisement. It was from a circus that had arrived from nowhere, featuring 4 lions and 2 tigers, promising a spectacular and appealing show. Additionally, the first day of the performance was free. Having nothing better to do, I made my way through the crowded mass and leaned against the fence to watch the lions performing a ball-rolling trick under the guidance of a trainer. Someone tugged at my clothing. Looking down, I broke into a cold sweat again. It was the same little boy, in the same clothes, only dirtier. He said, "Can you help me? I'm too short to see the big tiger." So, I hoisted him onto my shoulders, allowing him a clear view of the lions and tigers. He seemed thrilled, constantly exclaiming, "Wow, so awesome. That tiger must be obedient to get any meat to eat." I responded, "Right, these are trained by humans." After the performance ended, spectators had the chance to take photos with the tiger. The little guy kept watching others posing with the tiger, evidently envious. I asked him if he wanted a photo too, to which he sullenly replied, "But I don't have a camera." Just as he felt downcast, he suddenly shouted excitedly in one direction, "Teacher Wang, Teacher Wang." Following his gaze, I saw Teacher Wang with a camera, asking a trainer to take a photo for her. The little boy suggested, "Let's ask Teacher Wang to borrow her camera." Agreeing, I carried him in that direction. The flash from the camera kept flickering as the tiger, set for photos, lay lethargically on a platform, unmoving. Teacher Wang first took a photo standing beside it, then shook hands with it, and finally posed her head next to the tiger's. Without his reminder, I instantly recalled a memory. Once, Xiao Mei and I played a game emulating Wusong fighting the tiger, substituting the ferocious and ugly Teacher Wang for Wusong. The game of Wusong fighting the tiger transformed into Teacher Wang meeting her demise at Jinyang Ridge. Watching Teacher Wang and the tiger draw close, I suddenly knew what was about to happen. Desperately, I screamed, "Get away, get away!" But it was too late. As the flash lit up once more, the tiger, previously drowsy, suddenly became alert. It opened its wide mouth and bit her head off. A scream erupted from the crowd, followed by stunned silence. She trembled violently, limbs flailing weakly in the air until she went limp and stopped moving altogether. I finally understood. Pushing through the panicked, fleeing crowd, I exited the circus tent, set him down, and demanded, "Who exactly are you?" "I am you," he replied nonchalantly, his innocent expression infuriatingly adorable. "You're one of those paper figures, aren't you? Speak." I shook his shoulders hysterically. Why did everything we played in the paper figure game during my childhood inevitably happen again? Weren't those people supposed to be dead? In reality, nothing happened to Teacher Wang. She is still teaching mathematics at the elementary school I attended, and I met her last year when I went home. Right, but she died in the first half of this year, in March. There was a big circus in town, everyone knows about it. If you don't believe me, you can call and ask. Of course, I didn't believe this child's nonsense. Immediately, I pulled out my phone and called my mom. Without waiting for her to express surprise at why I was calling at such a time, I asked, "Mom, did a big circus come to our place in March this year?" My mom's response stunned me. "Yes, how did you know?" "I even went to see it. It was great, and you could take free photos with a tiger. Lots of people went." My mind went blank. The boy smirked at me, whispering, "See, I told you so." Ignoring him, I asked again, "Mom, did someone get killed by a tiger?" "Yes, who told you?" "It was a big scandal in our town. Apparently, a primary school teacher was killed." "Oh, it was your old school." The tiger cracked open her skull. It was horrible. The circus left before finishing their scheduled performances. "Why are you asking?" I couldn't speak and hung up the phone. The boy grinned. "Now you believe me, don't you? Teacher Wang is dead too." I stared at the child as if looking at the Grim Reaper. I frantically tried to connect all the dots. I remembered those paper figures. The game of the tiger eating people we played and destroyed 11 years ago had come true. I shuddered at the realization that if it was indeed because of those paper figures, then no one in the box would survive. Panic mixed with anger, I demanded, "Tell me, how can we stop these absurd things from happening?" "I don't know," he said. "Anyway, I'm just responsible for finding those people, just like Li Xiaolan is only responsible for taking them away." "Taking them where?" "To hell. Why does Li Xiaolan's night bus only have us few passengers each time? When are you going to take me away?" "I don't know," the boy said, looking down, his voice filled with grievance. "I am you, do you want me to take myself away?" "That's silly. Don't you have to go to work?" "I'll have to leave once you're not working anymore." I understood then. My job at the bar was ending in 3 days. By then, I would meet a grim fate like the others and be taken to a terrifying place I had never been before. If it really was because of those childhood paper figure games, then the only person who could change this situation now was Xiao Mei. She had played the game with me. If both of us were present, perhaps the tragedy wouldn't recur. I left him standing alone on the zoo's lawn and ran as fast as I could, not daring to waste a moment. I had to find Xiao Mei, and I only had 3 days left. Upon returning to the dorm, I immediately called my mom to ask if she remembered the girl who used to play with me back in the residential compound, named Xiao Mei. Of course, I remember her. Didn't she often come to our house? You were so close. It's just a pity that. I didn't let her linger in sentimentality, quickly asking, where did her family move to later? Do you have their phone number? Mom, please check quickly, it's urgent. They moved to City Z, I believe. It's been many years since she passed away, and then they moved. How could I possibly find their phone number now? What's wrong? Is something happening? Oh, nothing, I'm gonna hang up now. Before my mom could ask further, I hung up, slumping into my seat. A blank swept through my mind. Xiao Mei had died, when we were very young. Why don't I remember? I felt as if someone had drained my soul. If Xiao Mei really met a tragic fate, what could have happened? And what should I do? Sit and wait for doom? No, absolutely not. I must find that child. I need to clear things up. I found him easily, by the circus's fence where I had left him. He was playing with a girl his age. Sitting on the grass, they looked like two pure angels abandoned in the world, frolicking and laughing from time to time. As I approached, the girl appeared so vibrant and adorable, with shallow dimples on her round face, like a sweet, juicy peach. They were playing with Transformers, my favorite toy as a kid, which today's children may have never seen. I asked the boy, "Don't you go home during the day? Where are your parents?" Without looking up, he said, "Can't find them. I have to go pick up our pals at night. Just playing outside during the day." "Don't worry, look, I've got the key." Following his pointing, I noticed a bright new key hanging on a blue strap. However, the key was a master key, without any teeth marks, the kind only the owner would possess. I was speechless. The little girl stood up, suggesting we leave as it was getting dark. Tension rose within me as I stared at her, finding her strangely familiar but unable to recall where from. I asked, "Where are you going?" Seemingly ignoring my question, she continued to accuse the boy of ruining her paper figures and demanded compensation. Then, laughing, she claimed the transformer as hers, and they walked away together. I rushed up, grabbing the girl's hand, soft, fleshy, and warm. I asked, "Could you tell me your name?" The girl looked at me doubtfully. "I'm Xiao Mei." How don't you recognize me? If you forget me again, I won't play with you." I stood frozen, unable to speak. She was Xiao Mei, she knew me. Yet, she seemed not at all surprised that there stood two Hang Shi, one 10, and one 20 years old. I couldn't distinguish which one of us, the boy or myself, was Hang Shi. If both were, then which one was the paper figure? Only after they are far away did I, as if struck by lightning, shout towards her, "Xiao Mei, where are you going?" She heard and turned back, smiling at me. "I'm leaving, my paper figure was torn apart by the teacher." Am I also one of those torn by Teacher Wang from that box of paper figures? Where would they go? Fear surged within me, an inescapable substance flowing through my veins, propelling me to follow them despite my dread. I trailed behind them, the children hopping and skipping ahead. My legs felt as if filled with lead, each step unbearably heavy. Regardless of my efforts, I couldn't bridge the 10-meter distance, which seemed insurmountable, like a gushing river between the shores of life and death, unrelated and unapproachable. They walked past a construction site, where a building was laying its foundations. Cranes moved slowly, hoist chain clanked, and concrete mixers roared. Amidst their playful skips, Xiao Mei lost her balance and fell straight down from the plank, right into a running concrete mixer below. My blood rushed to my head, screaming voicelessly. I finally remembered. When I was 10, Xiao Mei fell into a concrete mixer at a construction site we passed by while playing, getting gruesomely crushed. Her remains were unrecognizable, picked from a pile of concrete by police, and handed to her parents in a bag. Soon after, unable to bear the grief, her parents left the city. I looked at the boy who watched everything indifferently, running towards me, insisting he hadn't meant for it to happen. How could I have forgotten? That moment has been rooted in my heart, tormenting me. Because Xiao Mei refused to let me copy her homework, I pushed her, not knowing it would lead to this. That night, I went to work at the disco. I didn't want to hide. This fleeting thought in my heart was clearer than ever. These events had happened, and there was no escape. The night bus arrived as expected. Li Xiaolan was driving, and I sat in the empty bus. At a station, the little boy, Xiao Mei, and Teacher Wang got on. They greeted me before sitting ahead. Teacher Wang, tall enough, revealed 2 rows of gore on the top of her head, still losing blood. Xiao Mei, with stitched seams on her face, neck, and arms, sat there like a doll pieced together from scraps of fabric. Cement and blood mixed, emitting a bizarre fragrance in the night air. After Teacher Wang tore our paper figures, Xiao Mei tried to mend them with tape but failed, the pieces were too shattered. The only one she managed to repair was herself. The next morning, not long after I'd woken up, my dorm mate Aiming pushed open the door and boomed at me for still being in bed, pretending to be dead. "Big brother, you really are something. I've already finished my class, and you're just waking up." I rolled my eyes at him, unimpressed. Big surprise. Any college student who doesn't skip class must have an issue with their brain. Aiming, not the type to dawdle in conversation, quickly changed into his sports gear, preparing to leave for basketball. Before exiting, he turned as if remembering something and mentioned, "Oh right. Your grandpa came to visit you. Hurry down to meet him, don't leave the elderly man waiting." What? I questioned my hearing. My grandfather had passed away 6 years ago, and like my mother would say, he might now be watching over us from the heavens, dwelling in another world. As I stood there bewildered, Aiming urged me again, almost shaking the house down with his booming voice, "Hey, would you hurry up? Don't let the guys say you're disrespectful." Hastily throwing on clothes and rushing downstairs, my eyes widened in shock. My mind surely must be playing tricks on me, otherwise, how could I explain everything that's been happening? That sprightly elder with white hair and a goatee beard, cheerily bouncing his decades-old suitcase, the one he never parted with, it couldn't be anyone but my grandfather, could it? I instinctively stepped back, as if overwhelmed with a surging fear, watching my grandfather approach step by step. And in his other hand, he held the peculiar child who claimed to be mine, a perfect picture of grandfather and grandson. What should be a comforting scene filled me with despair instead. I rushed over and grabbed him, demanding, "What exactly are you planning to do? My grandfather wasn't one of the paper figures I made. What are you doing with him?" The boy seemed aggrieved, explaining, "I know, it's my grandpa who has come for me, not the other way around. Have you forgotten? You only managed to make those paper figures so well because Grandpa taught you during the spring festival of your 6th year." My grandfather, upon seeing me grabbing his grandson, gripped my hand with an iron-like strength. The pain shot through my wrist as if it was cracking, so I let go of the child. Then, with a strong push, Grandpa sent me tumbling to the ground like a rock. The shock brought me to the brink of tears. I am his grandchild yet. This kid must be a little devil, whoever is with him ends up meeting a terrible fate. In my panic, I blurted out, "Grandfather, I am Shi. I'm your grandson Heng Shi." It was as if grandfather didn't quite grasp what had happened. Seeing me on the ground, he pulled me up with concern asking if I was hurt. I shook my head and he immediately broke into a smile. "Good that you're okay. Now, come see what Grandpa has brought you." He excitedly opened the suitcase in front of me. A whole case of exquisitely made paper figures lay squished together inside the tiny box. They held various expressions but stared out with hollow eyes at the vast sky above, silent and frail, forever unable to find their way home. I felt on the verge of collapse, paper figures everywhere. They walked the streets, worked, fell in love, and in spaces as cramped as a paper box, endlessly cycling through joy and sorrow, love and separation. Fragile to the core, shredded by fate, leaving no trace. Emotion surged within me, and I wrapped my arms around my grandfather, crying uncontrollably. Grandfather was the best craftsman in the village. Carpenter, mason, he excelled at all tasks. But his greatest skill lay in creating paper figures. With a pair of scissors and a bundle of colored paper, his calloused hands could quickly bring one to life. People said his paper figures were alive, they could run if laid on the ground, with wings attached, they could fly. But no one liked paper figures. In rural areas, they were considered ominous and only used during funerals. The more lifelike they were, the worse, it was believed they could steal the essence, intellect, and spirit of the living. Thus, nobody wanted Grandpa's paper figures. He kept making them one after the other, stashing them in that leather suitcase. Those were his treasures. When I was 6, during a visit back to the countryside, my favorite things were those paper figures. Whenever Grandpa made them, I would look on with envy and curiosity. But he never allowed me to touch them, no matter how much I pleaded. One day, unable to resist any longer, I sneaked open the suitcase while no one was home and played with each figure. They could cry, they could laugh, they could tell a child many dark stories about accidents and death. I was utterly captivated. It wasn't until Grandpa stood at the door, furious and in shock, that I realized I'd done something wrong. But unafraid, I grabbed the box of magical figures and ran, darting under his arms. Clutching that box of marvelous creations, I raced for the ridge. Grandpa chased after me, but he couldn't catch up. Standing at a distance with pride, I taunted him with laughter and scampered off again when he drew close. But I stumbled over a rock I didn't see, and my bulky padded jacket impeded my movements. I crashed hard onto the ridge, and the wind whisked the paper figures from the flung-open box, scattering them into oblivion. That incident was promptly ignored, never mentioned again even when I left my hometown. But those paper figures lived on in my memory, crying and laughing, telling me stories of childhood. So, on a drowsy sun-drenched summer afternoon, as if compelled by destiny, I took up scissors. The paper figures I crafted lacked life, yet Xiao Mei and I invented the paper figure game. Grandpa coaxed me, a 20-year-old lad, until my tears subsided. The fear was gone. I remembered all the stories told by those figures, the games played with Xiao Mei. Now, I was utterly desperate. I looked up at Grandpa, asking if paper figures really could steal the essence and intellect of the living. Was it true, as the villagers said, that they brought harm? Grandpa chuckled, shaking his head. How could they harm anyone? Weren't you ever afraid as a child? Of course, there's always that inexplicable fear in a child's heart. Be it of big bad wolves, old monsters, needles, bloodshed, death, even the mere darkness could make one cry, I replied. Those paper figures are you. They embody the fear of your childhood, Grandpa chided, stroking my hair. As you grow older, those fears linger in your favorite toys but are eventually thrown away. But you opened my box and let the figures escape. You even made paper figures later, they carried your childhood, sealing your fears within the box. They must have been lost, so you need to find them one by one. Find them? I asked, looking dubiously at the child who claimed to be me. Was this all an illusion? Turning to him, I questioned, are you going to bring them all back? Yes. You are me, and I am you, the childhood you. You lost me. I was at a loss for words. How many people lose their childhood as they grow up? So, how exactly do I find you? I asked. There's an old dictionary on the bookshelf in your dorm that you brought from home, remember? Your paper figure is tucked inside. Just find it and bring it to me, he said, looking up at me. I ran back to my dorm, frantically searching through my disused and dusty bookshelf. The dust spread through the room like a choking haze. My dorm mates, annoyed, asked if I was looking for money to be acting so crazy. I couldn't be bothered to explain, merely saying, I'm saving my life. Finally, I found the dust-covered dictionary among a pile of old books. Opening it, the piece of paper that had slept there for 11 years appeared before my eyes. It was so small, so crude, and the paper had yellowed as if it were a child left behind, lying there all alone. It felt like grasping at a lifesaver in a flood. I clutched the book close to my heart. I could survive, I thought, laughing through sweat-drenched relief, feeling as though I had been spared from disaster. The next night, after I finished my work at the disco, I left that noisy, dazzling, cart-and-horse playground. Standing on a silent platform, the sky covered in clouds thick as non-existent, the night fell like a forgotten deep sea. I knew I couldn't escape. I was waiting for Li Xiaolan's night bus. The little boy stood with me, and I no longer doubted anything. He was right, I am him, and he is me. I had lost him. Now, everyone had been found except me. Bright headlights blinded me as the bus crushed the night with its rolling wheels. The child, seeing the night bus, ran towards it waving excitedly. He was so carefree and innocent, like any child indeed would be. I handed over the paper figure to him, and he seemed pleased, carefully folding it and putting it into his pocket. "You finally found me," he cheered. "Now everyone is together. I can go back now." I looked at the child, stooping down to stroke his forehead. His scent, his smile, was just like mine when I was young. I smiled at him, relieved, then asked, "Can you tell me now where you're going back to?" He nodded, then confusedly looked up at me. "You really don't know? Well then, let me ask you, how many dimensions does the space we live in have?" "3 dimensions, I answered, surprised he brought this up. "Isn't every space 3-dimensional? "But that's not right. Our living space is actually 4-dimensional. From point to plane, from plane to volume, the 3 dimensions plus time constitutes the space we exist in," the child replied, catching me off guard. "The space we exist in is the same as here, only the time is different. It's your childhood. We are all paper figures you made, living in another space because we carry the memories of your childhood. Just like grandfather, after he passed, he moved to another dimension with the stopping of time. But when teacher Wang tore the paper figures apart, the fragments couldn't reach that space, so besides me being preserved, the other figures in the box couldn't return. They stayed here, not realizing they've been torn apart, thinking they're still alive. So, they kill those who should remain in this space in their own way and take their place. I came to take them back." A wave of dizzying bewilderment hit me. The figures I once animated with life appeared before me. They couldn't cry nor laugh, but they had my stories. Now, those figures, like snowflakes in my life, carrying memories of my childhood. I wonder to which dark corner they sneaked away, watching me struggle through the tides of life. Where had I lost them? And where will they go in the end? I watched as the small boy curled into a question mark on the seat, spanning the endless road ahead of us. Then, as Li Xiaolan drove deeper into the darkness, it seemed she was traversing time, reaching beyond. I didn't want to know the answer anymore. At least, it was all over. The shattered figures were brought back to where they belonged. I wouldn't be killed by them, although those people whose names I wrote on the paper figures as a child have been killed by another past version of me, disappearing forever into the dimension where my grandfather resides. Now, I continue my mundane college life, like those classmates interested in everything but studies. Skipping classes, surfing the net, clubbing, dating. Until one day, during a legal program on TV, a serial killer who had wildly murdered 6 people was finally caught. Cuffed and shackled, he showed no remorse in his last days, boasting about his deeds on camera before his execution. But when a photo of him as a child appeared on TV, I was stunned. That angelic innocence, slightly evasive in front of the camera with large, bright eyes glittering with the most beautiful light of humanity. The narrator was right, no one could have predicted this sweet, plump, shy boy would turn into a heartless fugitive. I thought of the child in that space, my childhood self. I wonder what the weather is like there, what stories he is living through. I don't want to know the answer now because I finally understand, never link a person to their childhood because they have become 2 separate entities. Yet, I know that perhaps one day, as we sort through old belongings, we might drop a paper figure from an old book or find a dust-covered toy that was once our dearest possession in childhood. Then all the memories will revive like lightning. We will encounter that other self from a time gone by, the self we unknowingly lost. The fears that once drove us to despair will surge towards us once more. I am waiting.